Kelly, Michelle, hello, hello.
Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning, Sidney.
Good morning.
Yeah, another happy podcast day. And with us, we've got the one and only Sidney Grant of Ballroom Basix. We're really excited to hear all about that. Before we do, we're going to ask what's a common question for us, Sidney, is how did you get started in dance?
How did I get started in dance? Well, before I answer the question, I'd just like to say I really appreciated the podcast prep email where you said, think about what you want to wear, think about how you want to present yourself. So I am back in my New York City studio with a wonderful, colorful photo art piece of the Empire State Building behind me. And I am wearing my Ballroom Basix t-shirt, and I am wearing my Ballroom Basix mask, but I'm double masked for safety. And underneath here is one of 2,500, yes, 2,500 masks we were sent from Ford Motor Company. I think if I go close enough, you can see their little embossed.
There it is.
There it is. We participated in a virtual dance experience in connection with the inauguration on Wednesday, as well as an event in connection with MLK Day on Monday, Martin Luther King Jr. And the inaugural committee arranged for Ford to send us 2,500 masks for our kids to use in conjunction with the event. And one thing you'll learn about me in this podcast interview is I'm obsessed with alliteration, and our tagline for Ballroom Basix is fun, fitness, and fancy footwork. And of course, that goes right along with Ford. So I wanted Ford to hear right up front that I'm wearing their mask, because I'm coming at you, Ford, for corporate sponsorship, you can bet. Because Ford, fun, fitness, and fancy footwork just works.
There you go. A whole new love of the F word everywhere. Love it.
Yes.
Hey, that's so true. I love it. You're playing off the whole thing, and they're totally engaging.
And it's F words that we can use with the kids.
Yes.
Yes. But I don't know about you, Kelly and Michelle, but I'm feeling suddenly irresponsible for being here without a mask.
I know.
But I
You're
appreciate
totally making me feel like, I'm in the office by myself. No one is in this massive building, and I should be sporting a mask, Sidney. So
I appreciate the message you're sending, Sidney.
As I said just before we went live, I want to be your masked man of the Macaron Arena with the message of safety and adhering to protocols, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But in response to your question, David, about how I got started in ballroom dancing, both my parents were in theater and academia, and I was raised in and around the stage from a very young age. But there was the equal emphasis on artistic and academic accomplishment. And so I graduated, I was valedictorian in the School of Journalism and Communication from Rutgers College in 1987. And I went to work for AT&T headquarters in Basking Ridge, New Jersey, right out of my undergraduate experience. And a friend of mine that I had done summer stock with was teaching at one of the Fred Astaire studios about a half hour away from Basking Ridge. And she called me up and said, "You're not going to believe what I'm doing." And I'm like, "What?" And she said, "Ballroom dancing." And I'm like, "Ballroom dancing? That's so old fashioned. That's so this was long before it became repopularized." So I made fun of her for weeks. And she told me, "I'm telling you," she's like, "once you stop making fun of me, you're going to walk into the studio here and it's going to be hook, line, and sinker." And she wasn't kidding. I mean, I took to it like a fish to water. I realized this was something artistic that I could do evenings and weekends and still have my corporate job. And that is how it all began in the late 80s. And I competed in Atlantic City at the Fred Astaire, the regional comp there. And actually I won the junior mixed novice professional title with Peggy Ann Heaney, who went on to become the American Smooth U.S. champion with her partner, David Rosario, many years later. Was it David? Rosendo Famero, excuse me. So that was my start. there's a long answer to your short question.
Wow.
I love it. And I know you got into Argentine tango later. How did that happen?
Well, I relocated in 1990 after my New Jersey. I was raised in New Jersey. And I very quickly realized that even though the industry is set up very much in and around competition, I began dancing on weekends in New York with clientele at Roseland Ballroom, which sadly is no more. And I began teaching independently. And I recognized that the social element of partner dance is such an extraordinary thing that people sometimes forget about what makes partner dancing so special and so culturally relevant. It's an amazing way to connect outside of the context of competition. And one of my clients who especially loves the social aspect of dance took an interest in Argentine tango. And so in the year 2000, she and I traveled down to Buenos Aires together. And it was just a total revelation for me as a dancer. I mean, to see how much a specific dance was such a rich and detailed facet of a city's entire cultural expression. I mean, Buenos Aires and tango are synonymous with one another. And it's really, you know, the ballroom world owes a great debt of gratitude to Buenos Aires and to Argentina, because it was the wealthy porteños in the early 1900s who traveled to Paris to study at the Sorbonne, and they brought tango with them to Paris. Now, of course, it was a bit scandalous at the time because, you know, the close embrace was not something that any respectable person of society, particularly, you know, a woman of good breeding, would ever do socially. So that's how the distance in tango was integrated in the European expression of the dance. And of course, our ballroom tango is a descendant of that response from the Parisians and from Europe to the authentic Argentine tango, which has been my specialty now for 21 years.
Wow.
I got a quick question on that. So there's obviously a difference, like you said, when you got down there and you got down to Argentina, and just the fact that it's a cultural thing. It's not just dance. It's the whole, it's everything. What kind of difference was that to you from knowing what you knew before you went down to then afterwards seeing how did that shift your perception? What was that?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll answer your question, Kelly, with a very funny story. Most of you know that tango was repopularized first with the Broadway sensation, Tango Argentino, which starred Carlos Gavito, who was my first mentor. And when I brought my student and I for our first lesson with Gavito, and this was when he was starring or had just finished starring in Tango Argentino on Broadway, and he was a chain smoker, and this is when you could still smoke publicly in public places. So we come into the studio, and he's puffing away, and he looks at us, and you know, porteños, Argentines can be very blunt, and he's like, "Okay, show me what you got." Puff, puff. So of course, you know, I want to impress him with every single step or combination, which I think is going to dazzle him, right? Mm-hmm. And so, you know, we put on the music, and I do this whole thing with my student, and we finish, and he takes a big drag on his cigarette, and he exhales, and he says to me, "Okay, Senor Broadway, let's learn some tango." So what I recognized was, and I often tell people that for me, Argentine tango, the experience of Argentine tango was an unlearning. It was an unlearning, because our sense of what it means to partner dance and what it means to learn a ballroom and Latin dance curriculum is very syllabus driven. And that's not what Argentine tango is about at all. Argentine tango is an extraordinarily nuanced and subtle physical vocabulary. And delving into that vocabulary is one of the biggest blessings of my life. It has enriched my dance soul. It has reinvigorated my purpose as a dancer. And I have to say, it simply transformed me, both artistically and as a human being, because it deepened my. I already had a passion for the spontaneity and improvisation of social dance, but it deepened my convictions and my passions. And it's, I mean, a lot of ballroom dancers have different perspectives of like what Argentine tango is, and tango dance, Argentine tango dancers are snobs and they're this and they're that, and they have all kinds of stories about it. All I can say is it's an extraordinary way to deepen connection in partner dance, and I recommend anybody listening to the podcast, if they really want to once COVID is over and once we can embrace one another again. I'm a huge advocate for Argentine tango, obviously.
And that is so well said, Sidney. And it's so true. I think my favorite sentence so far is that it is the unlearning. And what is so true about that is that we're so structured from the very beginning of all instruction, and what we try to have as black and white, and this is right and this is wrong, and this is in the syllabus, and this is, the structure is there because it gives people guidance, and you need to learn how to draw in between the lines before you can get creative and step out of them. But that whole process of appreciating how incredibly different Argentine tango is where that creativity is just going to flourish. But there has to be the right time for people to embrace that, because it's so complex. The improvisational side of it is just delightful. It's like you're just decorating with your feet, and everything is just incredible. But it's really, that is it. It's really different. It's between, a palette of maybe 3 or 4 markers and an entire case of endless color. So that your painting behind you is a wonderful segue into that theme, right? Because that's really what you're doing. And it's so beautiful to get people, especially new listeners that maybe don't have a lot of understanding of it. It's a great divide between, formal stuff that you would see at competition that's so structured, and then the endless nuances of Argentine tango.
Yeah, and it's really a level of sophistication and subtlety and sensuality that's truly extraordinary. And for the edification of your listeners, I will explain to them that in terms of the way the tango experience is structured socially, the milonga. So there's 3 dances in tango. There's the Argentine tango itself. There's valse, which is the Argentine valse, and then there is milonga, which is more like an Argentine quick step. And it's a derivative of the candombe, which had the strongest influence from the African slaves in terms of the evolution of the dance. That being said, milonga also has a second meaning. Milonga is the name of the gathering. In other words, if somebody who dances tango says, I'm going to the milonga, it means I'm going to the tango dance. And the way the tango evening is structured is that the music is arranged in what are called tandas. And tandas are typically a series of 3 to 4 songs. And they're divided by a cortina. Cortina in Spanish means curtain. And actually, interestingly, Spanish was my minor in college. And my paternal grandparents, who grew up not far from you, Kelly, in Oak Park River Forest, they retired to San Miguel de Allende in Guanajuato, Mexico in the 1970s. And I had the good fortune of being able to study abroad there when I was 11 for 4 months, and then again when I was 14. And I then continued my Spanish studies in high school and then minored in college. So I am fluent in Spanish, and so I feel that Argentine tango is a little bit of my dance destiny, because many porteños, many people from the port city of Buenos Aires, they don't speak English. So I have to communicate with them in Spanish. So the cortina, the curtain, is the small piece of music that divides each tanda. And so typically you will sort of scan the room, and they use something called the cabeceo. Cabeza is the head. The cabeceo is the nod. It's the nonverbal invitation to join someone on the floor for the dance. And I have to tell you, in terms of social mores, in terms of social structure, this concept of the cabeceo is genius. Because first of all, it's not hovering over someone and saying, hey, you want to dance? And then putting them in the awkward position of having to either accept or decline. Or if they do decline, you're embarrassed because you're standing there thinking they would have said yes. So this idea of the cabeceo, to meet eyes with someone from across the room and invite them onto the floor, it's just an extraordinary way for a dance evening to occur. Because if, for example, you, Michelle, were sitting and someone's eyes met you and they nodded to invite you, and let's say it's at the time you were either speaking with your friends or it's somebody you don't necessarily want to dance with, you can just demur and cross your legs and look away. No one's embarrassed. There's no anxiety. There's no awkwardness. So it's really, I mean, societally, it's genius. It really is one of the greatest things. But the point being that in this tanda of 3 to 4 songs, it's extraordinary what you can experience with someone. And then the cortina comes, you return him or her to their seat, and then the next tanda begins and you look, for your next partner. So it's really an extraordinary dance, culturally, societally, and artistically. So I think that might be of interest to your listeners. So I thought I'd share that.
Thank you.
On that point, I've got a tango etiquette question for you.
Yes. Ask.
Is it proper to dance during that cortina, that short interruption when typically they're playing non-tango music?
Yeah, if you're Senor Broadway, puff puff. I mean, technically no, but some people, if they hear music that they like, that's the cortina, they never play the full song.
Right.
But that being said, David, it does bring up an interesting point that very often at a milonga, they will have a set of different music at least once or twice during the night. So there'll be a salsa or there'll be a swing. That's typically the two choices. By the way, they call swing in Buenos Aires rock and roll. They don't call it swing. So that will usually happen. And of course, you're encouraged to dance because they're specifically putting on that music so that there's a break in the evening. But no, the etiquette question is you're not really supposed to dance to the cortina.
Okay, well, that's good. So I'll tell you, the first couple milongas I went to, I don't have a lot of experience in Argentine tango, and I enjoy it at a kind of a beginner level, right? And I am more experienced in other types of dances. And so the cortina comes on, and I got excited because, oh, wait, I can do something I'm a little bit more proficient at. It was short. And I didn't really understand yet the full etiquette of and structure of how those tandas and cortinas work. So thanks for that information.
You're very welcome.
So, Sidney, you're sporting that cool Ballroom Basix t-shirt with fun, fitness, fancy footwork. Wow, I love it.
Let's hear about this wonderful dance life.
Well, as you've heard me say already, I'm especially passionate about partner dance as a social art form. And I think generally, especially in North American culture, which includes Canada, Michelle.
Yes, it does.
Lest we forget. We're a pretty competitive species, and I think people forget how important it is to experience things in life that are non-competitive and by their very nature, inclusive and diverse. This is not to say that competition doesn't have its place, and if people elect to compete for their own self-improvement or for their own goal setting, that's wonderful, and I encourage it. But I was really passionate about the idea to create a non-competitive partner dancing experience for school children. especially when you're speaking about school children. They already have an overabundance of athletic and academic competition in their young lives. You're a mom, right? I heard you speaking about your son before we came on the air. So I'm sure there's plenty of competition already in in his school. And so I founded Ballroom Basix back in 2008 in a single Harlem classroom. I actually relocated to Harlem before I founded the program because I felt that it was very important to live in the community that I serve. And we started in a single Harlem 6th grade. One of the reasons the program is named Ballroom Basix, as you can see here from the SIX, is for the 6th grade, as well as the 6 steps of the box step, because it's one of the core elements, of course, of waltz or foxtrot. We started in a single Harlem school, and that was with a few dozen kids. And in the 13 years since, we've served almost 20,000 school children in more than 100 New York City schools. And we're also working in St. Louis and Memphis and Cleveland, Ohio.
Wow.
And I'm really, really passionate about this work. I think you already heard me say earlier that I'm obsessed with alliteration. So in addition to the tagline of fun, fitness, and fancy footwork, our motto is making manners matter every move we make.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
So thank you. The whole emphasis of the program, I frankly, if the kids remember a step or a combination, that's good. That's okay. That's great. And if a child's actually motivated to want to dive deeper into dance, wonderful. But it's all about the etiquette. You talk to parents today, and the first thing they're going to tell you is kids have no sense of manners. I mean, honestly, who's teaching manners to kids today? I mean, and if we look at I don't want this podcast to become political, but if we look at the last 4 years and what's transpired in this half of North America, Michelle, it was an absence of manners and civility. And if we don't keep the civil in civilization, we're really sunk as a culture. And so it's all about the civility. It's all about the etiquette. And that's why Dr.dance, all the kids in schools know me as Dr.dance. That's why Dr.dance, I'm referring to myself in the third person, is so driven and dedicated to this mission, because I really feel it's an excellent way. You know, kids are addicted to cell phones. They're addicted to, in so many ways, they are disconnected. And one of the reasons right now I'm so passionate about the program, even though we've had to pivot to social distanced and virtual instruction, is that we are in a time of grave disconnect. And so I'm like, wow, we can really make a difference in terms of the connection that we provide. So I'm as you can tell, just a little bit excited about the work I do.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, Sidney, because, you know, right now in the chaos of this COVID-19 terrible times that we're all going through, that's exactly what's missing, right? We're missing the one thing that everyone needs, and it's connection. And it's just lost. I mean, I look at it on so many levels. I look at it as a mom and look at my kids getting so disconnected from what would be considered normal and what they need for that structure. I look at it for my students of our studio, and I'm like, this is such a social element and connection of their lives, whether it's with other students, whether it's about their partner, whether it's about dance or growth. And all of these things are just slowly, just constantly being removed. And it's dangerous. You know, I'm so glad to hear that you're doing this virtually and trying to help, but there's so many critical things that we need for everyone. So whatever way that we can offer that is so important right now.
Well, thanks. And as a mom, you'll probably be interested to hear, David and I discussed this in our one conversation prior to the podcast, and that is that our culminating event, we call it the Ballroom Basix Bash. And our our slogan is, we don't beat the other school, we meet the other school. And what we do is we bring together two schools that have done the program concurrently. And literally the students from the one school have to go over to a student that they do not know from the other school, and they have to say, may I have this dance, please?
Love it.
And the response is, yes, you may, and thank you for asking. So it crafts consent into the reply. And what's really remarkable about this is, I mean, it's just human nature. If the dynamic is competition, the there is an element of, I won't say negativity, but there's certainly an element of, I'm going to beat you because that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to win. Whereas if you're meeting in a non-competitive environment, it's simply about, I'm here to get to know you, or I'm here to share this experience with you. And educators and parents are really appreciative of the fact that we recognize how important it is to harmonize peer relationships between children, especially during times like these that are so fraught with difficulty and challenge. So that's really what sets my program apart from other, partner dancing programs. And really what makes, you watch kids have the presence of mind to ask somebody they don't know for a dance. I mean, you're an adult. Kelly, David, I mean, we as adults to ask somebody for a dance. As adults, that takes nerve. As adults, that takes guts. Mm-hmm. So the fact that we're crafting that into an adolescent experience for a child, that's a huge impact for their social and emotional learning.
Yeah, for sure. That's totally amazing. One more time for me. What did you say? We don't beat the other school. We meet the other school. I love that. I love that line. You have such great taglines.
Thanks. So my corporate career was in marketing and advertising. I guess it's come in handy.
So I'm just curious, Sidney, if when you were talking about that, I heard you mention grade 6, obviously part of your Ballroom Basix. Grade 6 being relevant for age, for maturity, for the introduction of that etiquette and social skills of interaction. Do you go ahead with additional grades that are higher, and have you ventured anything lower?
So the answer to your question is yes. Before I elaborate on that, though, I want to point something out to the listeners that they may or may not be aware of, depending on where they're listening from. Here in the Northeast, 6th grade is typically the first year of middle school. Okay. So a child who did pre-K through 5 in an elementary school environment, typically 6th grade is the first time that they are matriculating to a new environment with new peers.
Oh, that's
so
nice.
One of the reasons why this kind of activity, and by the way, another facet of the structure of my syllabus and methodology, which I think Kelly, Michelle, David, I think you'll all find very interesting, is it is rotational. I based the structure of every dance on a wonderful dance that I learned the first night I ever went two-stepping in New York City, like 30 years ago. A friend of mine's like, come on, you're a professional ballroom dancer. Why are you so nervous? I'm like, I have never two-stepped. I don't know the first thing about it. And when you go two-stepping, once a night, they say, okay, everybody, get out on the dance floor and circle up for the barn dance. Now, I don't know if the three of you know the barn dance, but what's great is like the kids' pop music is a perfect fit for the barn dance. And it's like a side-to-side step, sort of like bachata, but without the hips. And you do a turn, you turn back, you step back, you clap your hands, and you move to the next partner. And literally, by the end of the song, you've danced with everyone around the circle.
I saw that on one of your videos, and that was fantastic. I was like, your transition of constant rotation over that is delightful. It's so great to see.
Well, thank you, because the whole point is no two kids want to be stuck together for a whole dance. And
they don't look at each other. They dance like this.
They don't look at And even more importantly, what it means is because there's constant rotation, the most popular kid in the class is going to dance with the least popular kid in the class. And hopefully, over the 12 to 16 weeks that we come in, they're going to have a shift in the way they interrelate because of our work. Because the rest of the day, they would have nothing to do with one another, because the one kid is unpopular and the other kid is popular. And so what I love about this work is that regardless of popularity, ethnicity, ability, orientation, every child is included and respected, and it really changes the social landscape of a classroom. So in response to your question, Michelle, about the grade levels, yes, we teach actually as young as third grade. We've gone even younger upon insistence. Sometimes the motor skills aren't quite there, but we've gone as young as third grade. And we do teach into high school, and we've had a lot of success being a program as part of the freshman experience in the ninth grade, in the first year of high school, for the same reasons that it's effective in the first year of middle school. It's a new, you've matriculated from middle school to high school. You have a new peer group. And so as a part of the freshman experience, they integrate Ballroom Basix, and it's been very successful.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Sidney, I did want to ask, last season, one of our most popular episodes was an interview with Pierre Dulaine, who founded the Dancing Classrooms program. A wonderful, wonderful man, wonderful program. We have a lot of respect for what he did. And some of our listeners who heard that episode might be wondering what's really different between these two. And as you were speaking, I think two things that stood out to me that just differentiate the approach. One is, you said, we're not here to beat the other school, we're here to meet the other school at your culminating event, and that it's non-competitive, and that it's rotation-based. And I believe in the Dancing Classroom program, at some point as they're being taught to prepare for the competition, kids are paired up, and then they're kind of, I believe they're more or less stuck with that pairing through the competition. Is that correct? Or are there other things that motivated you to want to create a differentiating program?
Well, the first thing I'd like to do is echo your deep-seated respect for Pierre Dulaine. I share that respect. I worked for Pierre for 7 years, and I feel that what he's done is remarkable, and I'm so glad to hear that his podcast with you was so popular. I want to also respond to your question about the structure and difference between our programs, and say that yes, you are right. In Pierre's program, at the conclusion or toward the end of the program, they audition the children and pick 10 children, 5 couples, to be on the team to represent the school, and then an alternate couple. So it's a total of a dozen kids. And one of the reasons why I am so passionate about the Ballroom Basix Bash concept is that it's not about singling out different children to represent the school while the others don't, get an opportunity to showcase what they learned in a concluding event. My idea is that every child, regardless of ability, should be able to participate in the culminating event. Largely, and it's very interesting because I have my social media director, her name is Miss Ricky, lifelong Staten Island resident, and she joined me about 1.5 years ago, and she handles our social media, and she actually had the program back in her 5th grade year. That's another distinction, by the way. His program does not do 6th grade, and 6th grade, for the reasons that you heard me explain, is our focus, even though we do teach younger and older as well. But Ricky actually said to me in her interview, and this was unprovoked. It wasn't like in response to a question I asked. She simply offered up that when she was in 5th grade, and she's an actress. She's appeared on Broadway. She just finished working as the concierge director for Dear Evan Hansen on Broadway. And then, of course, Broadway is dark because of COVID. But she said to me, she wanted more than anything to be on that team. Like, as a child, it was one of the most important things to her. And she's a plus-size girl. And she wasn't picked for the team. And she offered up in her interview with me that to this day, as a young adult in her 20s, it's the most devastating thing that occurred to her in her childhood. And it breaks her heart to this day that she feels that because of her size, she was not picked to be on the team. Now, I'm not saying that may or may not have been the exclusive reason, but as someone who was made fun of in his youth and someone who endured a lot of bullying, I don't want to create an experience where any child feels rejected. And I think that this concept of, as Kelly asked me to repeat, we don't beat the other school, we meet the other school. I think it's a way to ensure that kids who feel bullied or left out feel embraced and included.
Yeah, and as you said, Sidney, there is a plethora of choices for a competitive world if that's what you choose. And that is where you can go ahead and get into your organized sports and get into worlds of competition and, feeling accepted or chosen or picked or not. But there is enough of those and not enough of this neutral platform that allows you to just grow and be. And the social side and the etiquette side and the manners and all your wonderful taglines, I can't say enough. I love it all. I've taught for many years in a high school perspective, in large gymnasiums with lots of kids, trying to manage 80 to 100 kids with a headset on and being Britney Spears and doing the same thing, right? Trying to get them to rotate and do the same thing. But yeah, there's so many things that come into it and it's just such a joy. But yeah, there's enough competitive elements in our society that this is why this is so appealing, because it's a choice other than that.
Yeah, and
so many things.
If I could just respond to that briefly, Michelle, what I'd like to say is, yeah, it's wonderful, as I said earlier, if you want to elect or choose competition for your own goal setting and your own self-improvement, that's wonderful. But to layer an arts and education experience with competition as the end goal, remember, I was raised by artists and educators. So I come at this from a perspective of both artistry and academia. And I feel that if we're trying to teach the whole child socially, emotionally, and intellectually, the healthiest thing to do is an inclusive activity, because it's most validating for the most number of children.
Yep, exactly.
So one of the things I didn't realize, that two programs, if I understood correctly, target slightly different age ranges. And as I said, with so much respect for what Pierre has done, and I'm going to guess that if it wasn't for all the great work that Pierre had done with founding dancing classrooms, I think he told us was like 26, 27 years ago, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes.
That might not have inspired your efforts as well. And it might be really kind of cool that if someone had been in, especially in New York City, where both programs seem to have quite a lot of traction, that someone who had gone through that experience with dancing classrooms, that perhaps in the 5th grade, and if they didn't get picked or whatnot, maybe it's really, really nice that when they matriculate and they go into the middle school, if they're exposed to Ballroom Basix, they have that chance, and it's a different kind of experience. I think that's wonderful, right? I think both programs are doing such wonderful work. I just applaud you for what you're doing, Sidney.
Thanks, David. And actually, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I've had a few experiences throughout the last 13 years of my work post dancing classrooms. And there have been students in our 6th grade settings who had dancing classrooms in the 5th grade. And what you're describing is exactly the affirming thing that has occurred, is that some of the students were students that were picked to be on the team. Some of the students weren't students that were picked to be on the team, but they all get to experience this heightened harmonization, if you will, that's part and parcel of our approach. So yes, and of course, New York's a big city, and we live in a big country. So I think there's obviously room for both programs, and I appreciate the forum to be able to, speak openly about why I'm so passionate about my particular approach to it. So I thank you for that.
Well, I will say, to your point, it is a big country, it is a big world. And while you mentioned that you've got coverage in a lot of schools in New York, you mentioned St. Louis, you mentioned Cleveland, I've forgotten already the other places you mentioned. Memphis. That's really awesome. But that means that there's a lot of places where these programs are not today. And I hope we can help in a small way to get the word out about such wonderful programs, because there's a lot more kids that really could be benefiting from this type of thing.
Well, interestingly, one of my private Argentine tango clients is married to a Kiwi, a New Zealander, and they divide their time between New York and New Zealand. And she's very active with supporting Indigenous rights and Indigenous development in the impoverished Maori communities in New Zealand. And I'm going to be going down as soon as, interestingly, New Zealand, by the way, if you do some research off air, the female president of New Zealand, they handled COVID better than any other country in the world. But I'm very, very excited because in conjunction with the University of, it was either Wellington or Auckland, I'm not sure which, but we've had several meetings, and I'm going to be heading down under. I'm going to be heading down under to dance with the Maori, and I'm merengue with the Maori. I couldn't be more excited.
You found the alliteration. I love that.
Yeah, I always do.
New Zealand is on my bucket list. I have never been to New Zealand. I'll carry your bags.
Okay.
Oh no, that's wonderful. But to the point I was making, if someone listening to this podcast would like to bring attention to this program in their community, right, their school district, how could they best do that?
Well, this is a perfect opportunity to segue to our project du jour, which I created last April at the height of the first wave of COVID with my identical twin brother, Russell. And we did a song and dance parody of the Macarena called the Macarona. And I'm really glad that you had a chance to take a peek at it before the podcast. And one of the reasons I'm especially excited about this particular project is because I had to dig deep during COVID to find my creative reservoir. I was pretty devastated that the schools closed, and essentially, we lost a staggering amount of business, as so many nonprofits did, especially dance nonprofits. And the fact that I could tap into pop culture and create something that was appealing not only to students, but to parents and families, because, the Macarena is one of those things that it's kind of ubiquitous, right? It's like everybody somehow did it at a wedding or at a social or somewhere, right? And so there's a frame of reference with the dance, and the fact that we reinvented it as a way to not only energize and engage students and families, but also as a way to seriously and artistically advocate for pandemic protocols of mask wearing, of social distancing. And so this is our main programmatic offering right now, and what's been really, really popular in terms of something that we can safely do in school, whether it's outdoors or in a gymnasium, as the song says, stay, 6 feet away, way. So the movement and the lyrics go together. So if someone were really interested right now to want to do something either virtually or social distanced in their community or in their school district, I would strongly encourage them to reach out. We have two websites, not only the website for the Ballroom Basix program, but we actually have a separate website now for macaronarena.org, because we are a nonprofit. So they could write to us at either site. And we are loving the fact that despite the challenges of COVID, the virtual world is wide and wonderful, and so we can teach far and wide, and we're very proud to be able to do that while we all patiently wait for vaccination and recovery. So I would strongly recommend they reach out on either website. There's a place to send in an email. So please reach out, because we love, it was interesting, Michelle, you mentioned earlier how devastating the crisis has been in terms of our mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And it's insidiously so. And the fact that a program like ours can come in, even if it is only through the computer, and get people up out of their chairs or out of their beds and get them up and doing some fun dancing, it can really, really, really help offset the isolation and depression and anxiety and loss so many people have experienced.
Nice. So we will put the contact information for both those websites in the show notes. So if you're listening, you'll be able to find that information there. Thanks.
Awesome.
Now, I did want to mention, you've been too modest to mention it here, but I had heard that you won the National Tango Championship a few years ago. So you really are, you're someone with creds, right? You know what you're doing. Now, one of the things I found really interesting is when I think about the stereotypical tango master, it's someone very macho and typically this kind of quiet machismo, right? And when I've seen you in some of your videos and stuff, you're kind of almost the antonym to that. Like I see you with this blazer that looks like a disco ball, and you're so animated with the kids. It's wonderful. And I'm wondering how much of that is part of the plan, just to like really engage kids and put yourself out there. You see like bright red pants and stuff like that. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Sure. I'd be happy to. I do have to say that when Gail Madera and I won, it was the last year actually that it was the transition year for the Argentine Tango Championships. They're now in San Francisco and have been for a number of years. But in 2011, Gail Madera and I did win. And when we won, it was the first time that a North American couple, meaning neither people of the pair was of South American origin, whether it was Argentine or Colombia, Medellin, Colombia, which is where Carlos Gardel's plane went down. Gardel, by the way, if your listeners don't know, Carlos Gardel was the Elvis Presley of tango. And actually, if you really delve into his history, a much larger figure culturally than even Elvis Presley. But in any event, when we won, it was the first time both people in the pair were North American. And in my case, it was the first time that an openly gay male dancer won. And I do have to say, in a dance art form that is traditionally, and some might say stereotypically, macho, it felt very affirming that I could win and that my sexual orientation is not what was being assessed by the judges, that what was being assessed was my, prowess and polish and flair. I didn't have a disco ball jacket on at the time, but but there's always flair there. And I'm rather glad that you brought it up, because I think the fact that it took me a long time to be vocal about my orientation in the context of my profession and as an arts educator. That's something that takes time. You have to be personally confident to speak about it. You have to be professionally confident to speak about it. But in my case, it feeds very logically into the very premise of my program, which is inclusivity and diversity. And so one of the things that's very nice about my program, and I think very evolved, is that we do have lady leaders and we do have fellow followers, and we don't make gender an issue in terms of partner dancing. And we remind all of our children and all of our students that people are people and anybody can dance with anybody. So lead, follow, or get out of the way.
I love that response. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you for that.
I'm totally jumping in, David. I know you're excited. I think
No,
we're
go
all
for it,
excited
Kelly.
to talk to you, Sidney. Like, you're just, not only are you a wealth of information, but you're just so passionate about it. I feel like we could just continue to talk and be like, oh crap, it's Tuesday. We got to go do life, right? But I've watched some of your stuff and I love what you do. You do things like the high 10 and then hold it. I think that's amazing, especially for kids at young age who don't want to touch. But then it's like, oh yeah, this is easy. We got this. And you really focus on the social skills. Was that something that you had a game plan? And I'm messing myself up because I have so many ideas and so many questions I want to ask you. I'm sure you've developed other really simple, cool ideas to get involvement. Was that something you went into the game with, like in 2008 when you started it? Or are these just things that you've been like, oh, that didn't work, I shouldn't do that again? Or, oh, that really worked, I got to make sure to put that in the pocket?
Well, what's really nice is the school in Harlem where I launched the program in 2008. From 2008 to 2010, actually 2011, we actually worked with the same group of children in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade so that we could see them all the way through their middle school years. And it was trial and error. It was seeing what facets of the script and syllabus worked best. And that was the wonderful thing. When you have an educator, his name is Dr. Mack, Dr. Peter McFarland, and he serves on my board of, at my advisory board now. And it's when you've got that support of somebody who says, listen, I get your vision and I want to help you fulfill it. So yes, my students are your clay. Go at it, And so that's what we did. And the truth is, yeah, there's different ways to get kids gradually into dance position. But what I'll respond to specifically the thing you said about, the high 10 and the high 10 and hold it as our way to trick them into it. Mm-hmm. It's using something, kids give each other high fives and high 10s all the time. So we're using something they are familiar with. You can't walk into a school and be like, and this is proper dance frame.
That does not work.
They're gonna be like, we're kicking you to the curb, you loser. Adios. So, what's really nice is, things continue to evolve. I now have another member of my team, a longtime instructor in New York, who was actually teaching for quite some time in Asia and Europe. His name is Alfredo Melendez. He's back now. He's been working with me for about a year. He was largely the architect of our virtual learning experience. And right now, like as we speak, we're developing these cultural models because many of the schools say, hey, listen, we're celebrating Black History Month, or we're doing something with Cinco de Mayo. So they really want, we always, by the way, underscore the cultural content. But they really want us to develop modules specifically to a subset of dances. And it's so exciting because it's like they're turning to us saying, hey, we know what you do is great. And we want to use you to help develop something that we know we can use as both an artistic and cultural component of our curriculum.
Beautiful.
Very nice.
Wow, it has been an incredible pleasure, Sidney. And as Kelly said, we could continue until Tuesday and beyond. But
We could tango till Tuesday.
I know, I should have gone there.
Another
My
alliteration.
goodness. I tend to do that, maybe not quite as smoothly as you, but I love those little ways. But yes, there is a ton of great information, and I'm sure this is going to rank up there as another very well received and enjoyed podcast because of all the content. Your enthusiasm is infectious, and it is a joy to speak with you. So thank you so much for your time.
Well, it's been a true pleasure being here, and I want to thank you for this fantastic forum. I've so enjoyed watching you interview other dance colleagues and friends of mine on the podcast. So to be among them is a true pleasure and honor. So thank you all.
Thank you, Sidney.